Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room, a show that strives to bring you information and views on the big issues that are taking place in British Columbia, Canada, the world. I'm Robin Adair, and this world never gets wilder or woollier than it has been in Saanich recently, and that's where my co-host with the most, John Jurisic, the Croatian sensation, is based. And boy, we've just had a big bank robbery in Saanich, of all places. 6 officers wounded, 2 robbers have been shot and killed. And this is crazy, John. It's not the Saanich I remember. And thank God they haven't defunded the police there.
So much to say about this, okay? First of all, that bank is my sister's bank. And she was there previously to this robbery. So, so there's really like, whoa, right? And then you think about what was the ultimate goal here? To shoot their way out into what? And then on top of that, yeah, you're right. Saanich is just it's a sort of akin to this sort of bedroom community from Victoria and West Shore where everything's going on. This kind of stuff is shocking to the community. The fact that I understand is close to 60 or 70 bullets were shot compounds the shock that all of us are in. So certainly any discussion about police funding and police resources and minimizing them in an increasingly dangerous world, an increasingly chaotic world, an increasingly unhinged world is unacceptable. More funding for our police to protect us from the insanity that's going on in our communities.
Absolutely. Well said, John. Saanich, Greater Victoria, is growing exponentially. The region is now reaching 400,000 people. That's a big city. We're becoming a big city. And Victoria is not Sleepy Hollows, the land of the newlywed and nearly dead anymore. And we need a police force that can make us feel safe. Mm-hmm. And you'd think this would be the highlight, the big story, the big thing to discuss today. But in fact, it's been supplanted in some ways because there has been a major resignation. And I can't say that this resignation has come as a shock. We've been wondering about that Royal BC Museum. It was an ill-fated announcement, and they were going to rip it down. They were going to spend almost $1 billion replacing it. John Horgan was defending it, and then suddenly he wasn't. He pulled back. He said, I made a mistake. So there was speculation. Was this going to be some sort of a legacy for John Horgan? Was he getting ready to make some big announcement? Well, guess what? The announcement came. And now suddenly the other shoe has dropped, and John Horgan will not be premier past this early portion of the fall.
Many of you will know, in fact, I'm pretty sure it's not a secret that I have gone through my second bout of cancer and successfully went through 35 radiation treatments, and I am currently cancer-free. My health is good, but my energy flags as the days go by. So before I could ask my colleagues what their plans were for the coming 2 years and beyond, I had to ask myself that. My wife, Ellie, the love of my life, spent a week, I guess 10 days ago, on the west coast of Vancouver Island in my constituency, reflecting on what we wanted to do with the rest of our lives before I asked that question of my colleagues. And we came to the conclusion that I'm not able to make another 6-year commitment to this job. And as a result, I've asked Aaron Shumahetsa, the president of the BC NDP, to work with our governing body, the Provincial Council and the Executive, to select a date in the fall for a leadership convention.
I don't think it comes as any surprise to anyone who views us, who's listened to us in the past, who's been aware of our activities, our political activities, that we generally tend to live on the right-hand side of the ledger. And but this man, John Horgan, and he's been a brilliant premier, and very sad to see him go, and especially under the circumstances. He's leaving because of his health, and so kudos certainly to him to leave at this time so he can enjoy the rest of his life But well, interestingly enough, how timed it is to the museum announcement debacle.
So, John, there really is more to life than politics. And so, as you say, and as a lot of people are saying, good for John Horgan. He is actually going to be able to leave with his head held high. He has some of the highest approval ratings of any premier in the whole country, and he's been able to maintain that through the COVID pandemic. People feel goodwill towards him, maybe not always goodwill towards all the policies of this government, but John Horgan himself has remained popular. So who replaces him? That'll be a question we'll have to look at. My money is on the Attorney General and Housing Minister, David Eby, but we'll have to wait and see on that. And of course, another question that we'll have to wait and see on is, what is the future still of the Royal BC Museum, John?
Yeah, I mean, you announce the debacle, then you cancel the debacle. It would appear to me that there's still a debacle in place. They've already gutted the museum, moved out the old town, in my opinion, the best part of that whole museum, and the Indigenous history exhibits on the third floor have been removed. So, what are you going to go there for? For the IMAX? I don't know. Watch for that building to probably close in the future. Therefore, leading one to say, what is the future of the museum? That's really not been resolved in all of this chatter and back and forth. Jeff Bray from the Downtown Business Association says, for starters, a new museum has to stay in Victoria.
Obviously, we still want to see a new museum at some point. We need a new museum, and we certainly want it in downtown Victoria.
Were you concerned that we heard about the old town being removed, and the next thing we hear is that the whole museum's going to be out of there for 8 years? I think there was sort of sticker shock about the whole thing locally, wasn't there?
Well, certainly there was a lot of criticism on the decision, and there was certainly concern among downtown businesses at such a long loss of such an important tourism institutions.
Were you concerned that the museum conceivably could be moved or could be moved in the future if it wasn't redone now here?
Well, certainly, it's the Royal British Columbia Museum. It's not the Royal Victoria Museum. And so, we think having the collections and archives that are going to be out in Colwood, and the Premier confirmed that is going to happen, it would make sense to keep it on southern Vancouver Island, but there's nothing that says it has to. So certainly we're going to be keeping an eye on that to make sure that the current location in the heart of our harbor, next door to our capital, is the perfect place for a BC museum.
Man, so, busy week in BC politics. I mean, BC politics has always been rambunctious. It's getting to a new level. However, despite the activity and chaos, what appears to be somewhat chaotic in our communities and our province, still this terrible war in Ukraine. We can't let that go. We can't somehow forget that that's happening. The latest act of insanity and barbarism, murderousness, created a new word for you. The Russians have bombed a shopping mall. 13 people have died so far. I'm sure that number will go into the hundreds. Apparently there were 1,000 people in that mall when it was bombed. Hundreds of people have been burned and injured. More people the death toll will go higher. What's to say? What kind of words can we say to describe this? It's disgusting. War is ugly. There's no doubt that soldiers on both sides are being killed, but dropping bombs on women and children, Robin, just plain sick. We've heard from Langford Mayor Stu Young and his humanitarian mission. I reached out to him, and that mission will soon return from Ukraine. He reports from Ukraine. It's crazy here and looks like things are going to get worse. Now, from a man who is generally very optimistic and the cup is always half full, that's not good. I told him to stay safe. Obviously, he has some kind of security entourage. I'm sure he does. We'll look forward to having a first-hand report from Mayor Young very soon. All I can say is I'm very proud that Canada is supporting Ukraine in whatever way we can, and hope this continues until the conflict's resolved and long after.
It's true, John, and I'm also very proud of Canada. I'm particularly proud of Canada always this time of the year. It's Canada Day season. Canada Day, always a day that I like to think about some of the things that are positive about my country. And the Ukraine is one of those many things. We've had a lot of finger pointing about Canada over the last couple of years. There have been different groups. They tend to be on the far right or the far left that are unhappy. On the right-hand side of the ledger, you have the truckers' convoy screaming that we don't have enough freedom, and they want to be the freedom convoy. And they say that Canada is muzzling people and not allowing people to make free choice. And on the flip side of that, you've got the protesters regarding old growth logging. And they say that Canada is a criminal state because it still allows limited old growth logging, a lot of it on First Nations land. And, you know, is Canada a perfect country? No. Is Canada still a country that's worth honoring? Well, I like to think it is. Canada deserves to celebrate its nationhood. Are we perfect? Well, we'll never be perfect. But are we a country where we can wave our flag and feel good about being a great democratic country? You bet. And I will stand by that and cheer on the fireworks.
Robin loves seeing fireworks on Canada Day, loves seeing them. In fact, quite the personal story around that. I have 4 children. We hung out with other families with 4 kids. How can you not do that? And this was a signature event for us to go downtown Victoria and watch the fireworks. And, you know, so there would be 10 of us on sort of the lawn there watching this. Then eventually there were 8 as the older ones start to move on and do other things, and then eventually 4, and then eventually we went from 2 to 10 to 2. So very personal, the fireworks display in Victoria. And I have to thank, therefore, for those amazing memories all these years, Councillor Charlene Thornton Joe, who put a ton of energy into the Canada Day celebrations over the years and deserves the utmost recognitions for this, okay? It has impacted all of us in the Victoria region, all of us who live here. Charlene has announced recently that she won't be seeking re-election in Victoria this fall. Ah, man, Charlene, we wish you nothing but the best, and hope at some point that we may talk to you on the Rumble Room and just review some of your legacy projects, of which Canada Day celebrations is one of them. We certainly need strong women leaders in times like these, much like Charlene has demonstrated. And guess what? We're about to meet another one, Robin. Let me set the stage a little bit here first. Down south, the U.S. Supreme Court has thrown out Roe versus Wade, and abortion rights are no longer guaranteed in the U.S., okay? Here was some of the reaction in Washington, D.C., when that announcement came down.
This means everything. This is the moment that we have been working toward. This is a historic day. This is the first day that America is living in a post-Roe generation.
Roe v. Wade is going to go. We are dancing on the grave of Roe versus Wade. It's like taking Normandy Beach, and we will get to Berlin. We will make it a crime in all 50 states to kill a baby.
I'm so beyond livid at what is going on, and I'm going to turn my fear into anger. There will be no functioning society without women, and the women are pissed.
This decision!
So, John, very strongly held views on both sides of this issue. There are people who really believe that it's important for everyone to have a chance to live, and they don't appreciate the idea of freedom of abortion, maybe sometimes under extreme circumstances, but it's a terrible dilemma for a lot of people and a lot of families, and it just depends on how you stand on human rights and whether you really believe sincerely that women should ultimately be the ones who choose what happens to their own body. And I know that you and I ourselves believe that to be true, but we respect people with other views on this thing. But we did decide to go out in the ranks of the pro-choice movement and see how people were feeling. And we found Trina Notman, who is the Vice President of Marketing and Communications for Accent Inns. And she was formerly the Chief Marketing Director for Destinations Victoria. In other words, she's a player in tourism. And she's also outspoken in regards to human rights, and in particular, women's rights. We thought it would be great to have a successful woman share her feelings about the decision at the US Supreme Court and what this means to many Canadians. So let's see what Trina Notman, who is a BCIT grad like myself and holds a master's degree at Royal Roads, has to say. Now, joining us in the Victoria Rumble Room for the very first time is Trina Notman. And Trina, it's great to have you on the show and great to have a fellow BCIT broadcast grad. You know, it's we got to stick together on this show. We could ask you all kinds of questions because of your CV about tourism, but really the focus and the reason that we have you on, and thank you for agreeing to do this, is we want to hear the thoughts of a successful woman in the business community in Canada about Roe v. Wade. The women's rights on abortion are being put in jeopardy by the Supreme Court down there. When you heard this, what was your immediate reaction? And are you worried about a ripple effect in Canada?
Absolutely, yes, I am. I'm also worried just for women in general, because there's, I'm worried for all of our women in North America. My reaction was, even just hearing you say it now, I feel sick to my stomach. And I woke up that Friday morning, beautiful, sunny, going into a weekend, our first beautiful sunny day. And then I got this news and everything turned. And I tell you, like many women, I grieved, and it's hard. It's very hard.
Trina, you're a young woman who's risen to a very prominent role in the tourism industry. There are a lot of women who are now taking senior positions, C-suite positions in business and other professions like medicine and law. It would appear that some sense of equality has been achieved, at least we hope. Do you think this Roe versus Wade issue comes down to a lack of equality? Is this sense of gender equity, does it actually exist?
Absolutely not. But it is, but you know what, it's so great, John and Robin, because it's very interesting, because you were good men, and it's very interesting to hear you say that. And it just shows that we as women, we don't talk enough about our struggles in front of men. Because you just don't realize that no, gender equity, we're nowhere close. There's still a massive pay gap. There's still, there's still sexism that happens. There's still all of this stuff. And going back, and with Roe v. Wade, it's just so in your face. Like, for example, we're going back 50 years at a time when women couldn't own credit cards, at a time when men could legally rape their wives. That's the time we're going back to. So it's very scary. And then to hear things like gay marriage, access to contraception, things like that are coming next. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. So there is no gender equity. There is no gender equity. And when you look at the makeup of some of our boards, for example, there is no gender equity there. So and all women have a collective consciousness that this exists, but we don't talk enough about it in front of good men like you.
Now, you worked in tourism for most of your professional career and have had a lot to do, I'm sure, with American tourists and American tourist operators and Americans in general. We all have, I'm sure, in one way, shape, or form. I have many American friends myself. So what's your read on the United States right now? This division between liberals and conservatives south of the border, why do you think it's so stark and so combative?
Well, I mean, I can't speak to that as much as I can speak to the woman's issues, right? Like the fact that that when you take away the
But it's
woman's
very
right,
stark on this issue. I mean, we just saw it with Roe v. Wade. We see conservatives applauding this action. We see the Republicans standing up and saying we're for it. And we see the Democrats in horror about it. It's like there's two Americas operating simultaneously. I guess that's what I'm going for.
yeah, there certainly is. There certainly is. And it's really scary. And it's also like that can happen here. You know, I think as Canadians, we all feel like, oh, that would never happen here. But I mean, that same thinking, it exists here as well. And, you know, we're a few elections away from having perhaps a different type of leadership that maybe doesn't want to uphold these things, the same things. So it's not an American problem. You know,
That's scary to hear. You know, my final question, Trina, is and you've begun to answer it, is what will you be watching for in the Canadian scene, therefore in the months and years ahead when it comes to social issues? You think young people in general, I mean, I hope so, and young women in particular will be energized and therefore more politically active because of what's happening in the States? It seems like there's only one way to fix this: get the right people in who formulate this policy in Canada.
Yes, and I'm talking, and I talk with hundreds of women, and what I'm hearing over and over is we have to be very, very conscious of that vote. Our vote, you know, we have to be very, very conscious of that vote that we have, and we have to really dig into the candidates that we have in front of us to know how they stand on these types of issues. Because like you say, that is our opportunity to make change.
We haven't seen the women's movement as such as, I guess, demonstratively active as we once did. I mean, there used to be giant women's rights marches, and famously back in the 60s and early 70s, they were burning bras and all sorts of things. And I think I wouldn't say it's a complacency, but I think there's been an optimism that we are moving beyond this, where we are moving towards more equality. We do see so many more women in the professions and so many more women in occupying higher roles in society and in government, that maybe we think we're past it. But do you think we could, in our immediate future, see more of this activism on the street again? Are we going to have to see that in order for the public to get the message that this is a real problem?
Absolutely. And I would add, there are more CEOs in Canada named John than there are female CEOs. So don't fool yourself that it's getting better, because it's not. And this is just a great example of how quickly and I love how you talk about, you know, burning the bras and like those big movements. And it's so important to remember the women that came before us that did all of that work. The women in 1983 that worked so hard to have women's rights enshrined in the charter, in our Charter of Rights. You know, they fought hard to have women's rights enshrined in that. And that is why, and women then, like, there wasn't sexual harassment. That was just called life. You know, that was just what life was at work back in the 60s and 70s. And when I talk to women from that era, I hear their stories, they'll make you fall off your chair. And that is why we can't give an inch back, because they fought so hard, and they went through, you know, violation and, you know, repercussions if they came forward. And, you know, they went through hell to get us the rights that we have, which is why we can't give it back. They fought too hard.
So great to hear from Trina Notman, and I hope for us to hear from her in the future. This issue is not going away. By the way, we, as you mentioned, you know, we're willing to hear both sides of this debate. That doesn't mean we agree with either one of them. There are many people who are pro-life. There are many others who believe abortion should only be used in some cases. I'm vehemently pro-choice. I know that we both believe in a woman's right to choose, but again, to all of our, well, thousands and thousands of viewers, you know, if a pro-life group wish to express themselves on our show, we'll make time for you. Contact us via our Facebook site.
That's right, John. We really do want to be able to reach out to our audience and be fair about this issue. And I don't claim to have all the answers here. I just know that it's important that we talk about these things openly and try to take some of the anger out of these discussions. So, you know, to keep the debate alive on this show is the key. And we're going to shift debates now to something else. that is also a little contentious, and that is affordable housing. And the missing middle is being talked about far and wide. Strongly held view that young people can only get into the housing market if we build more housing that fits, I guess, their needs, but also their price points. And that includes duplexes and triplexes and multiplexes. And, you know, smaller developers tend to be the ones that are building these projects. They have to go through a lot of hoops and ladders. There's so many different regulations with 13 municipalities in Victoria alone, and there's municipalities all over the Vancouver Island and BC that all have different regulations, so it can be very difficult. Plus, in certain neighborhoods, there's NIMBYism, not in my backyard, Jack, and that can make things complex and difficult. So, you know, I think some people brand developers as somehow they're out to make money, they're out to ruin my community. But a lot of small developers, I feel, are just trying to do good things. They're trying to build something. They're trying to build a business for their family. And, you know, you got to believe that they really have the best interests of heart in their community. We asked one of them, Ryan Jabs from Lapis Homes, to join us, and let's zoom him in now. And now joining us for the first time on Victoria Rumble Room is Ryan Jabs. Ryan, great to have you on the program.
Thanks, good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, and there's a lot of things we can dig into with you. I'm thinking right off the top, the big catchphrase we're hearing about these days, the missing middle in housing development. And prices on the island in general and Victoria in particular have gone sky high. There's a lot of chatter about the fact that the wealthy can always get into this market, and there's condos and houses being built for them. At the very low end, there's social housing, but there's a lot of people in the middle who can't even get in the market, and they're trying to think of ways to meet this need through duplexes and multiplexes to fill the gap. What's your view on this?
So a lot of views on this, but you're talking about Victoria's been floating a policy on missing middle housing, which is townhouse housing, pretty well. It's all townhouse housing, and as you said, they're trying to figure out a way to densify softly, gently, our single family neighbors or single detached neighborhoods. And I think about this topic a lot because it's what I do. I try and build these types of housing, and often, like, I have, when I apply for a house project on this land, and I've got to go through these long processes, talk to all the neighbors, they provide feedback, I make changes, then I talk to the various levels of planners, then I go through different committees, and it typically takes 2 to 3 years to get something approved on a piece of land, if you can get it approved. And so Victoria is trying to figure out a way, well, how do we reduce those timelines? How do we provide more of this type of housing, and make it a little bit simpler, and also provide more options so more people can kind of get in and do this kind of thing. And so it's interesting, and I find it, especially in the context of a housing crisis that we are, an affordability crisis that we've just seen running up and up and up, that a discussion on adding a few more units of housing in what is now pretty well exclusive luxury single detached markets. I mean, not many young folks can get a single family house in Victoria. How controversial it is to have this discussion and to potentially float a policy that might allow 20 to 30 housing units a year be built. So yeah, I can say more about it as well.
All right. No,
we'll probably let you do that. But anyway, yeah. John, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, fascinating perspective. First of all, thank you for joining the Rumble Room. Great to have a local developer here who can speak to the small guy. In other words, the missing middle guy. The types of projects that you take on are designed to fit into the communities comfortably, I think, and be reasonably affordable. What kind of challenges does a small developer face, I suppose, outside of the bureaucratic ones in this community, in a community like this?
Yeah, so So I said it's like it's tough to understand the controversy behind this, but it's not tough. Single detached neighborhoods, from my history, our cultural thinking about these neighborhoods is single detached means family homes. This is where you raise your kids. This is where kids connect with other kids. This is where families connect with other families. And townhouses, size-wise, they're a little bit bigger. They might seem to bring in more cars, more traffic. They signal change for folks. And so when I propose something to a neighborhood, there's a lot of discussion around why is it that big? How come that many units? How come that many people? This is going to change the very fabric of what our neighborhood is, which is, family housing neighborhoods. And from my perspective, and what we try and convey when we go through these discussions with neighbors is that this is the new family housing. And if we want to maintain the character of what is our family neighborhoods, we need to start allowing this kind of housing, and we need to do it a lot more quickly, because one project takes 3 years to get maybe 4 to 6 units of housing built. It's very hard to build a business around that. It's very hard to continue to do it. It's very expensive. So you're not attracting a lot of people to do it, and it's why most developers, they're not small. They don't stay proposing these because it's the same amount of work. It's the same amount. Sometimes they're more controversial. Sometimes they're just hard to get approved, and so with these processes, the length of time, the often negative feedback we get, it's tough to do, and so it limits the number of people that are in the market doing these things. And so this is one of my reasons why I want to see this policy get done. Is that I'll continue to do what I'm doing. I'll continue to propose housing in the Esquimalt in Saanich, in Victoria. But if we have a policy that allows this to be done by right, we might see more people come in and start doing this, and you actually might see more creativity. You might see people who not just looking at bottom line, but actually kind of care about their communities, who want to see, who own a house, who want to see their kids in the market. They might do a small multifamily on their property. You'll have a lot more options and opportunity for that kind of style of housing to get in. It means more competition for me, but I think like in this market, it doesn't matter. We need more competition. We need a heck of a lot more housing, and I think this could allow a little bit of that. I'm in the 3 core municipalities in very, very different style of how they do things. And there's not a lot of trust for some developers. And so you have to kind of each time, especially being, I feel an ethical developer, you have to kind of build that trust with the staff. You have to kind of work with them to kind of figure out how to get these things through the processes. You have to figure out, okay, Saanich gives you a 70-page report that you've got to work through after this, and Esquimalt is just a couple of conversations, and it's like it's super challenging. And then you have to figure out the political side of it, who is on council, what is their perspective around housing, how do they vote, what kind of risk tolerance can I assume when I'm proposing something? What kind of features do I need to look at? Is it all about aesthetics? Is it all about trying to figure out some level of attainability? Is it all about just the right fit in the right place? Is it all about just staying out of these communities altogether, like these certain neighborhoods altogether? But you've got so many dynamics, and then and then having so many municipalities so close together that have different ideas around it. It kind of springboards, and you talk to the bigger developers, but and you had Kevin Falcon on last week, but the province has been foreshadowing for a year-ish that they are looking at some legislation coming this fall. Hopefully that will include like time frames for development applications, so maximum time frames for approval, and at least to me that could encourage folks to rework their processes.
I've been involved with affordable workforce housing advocacy for some time. It blows me away at the slow pace of change. I'm startled that here we're, at the beginning of a conversation about missing middle, when in fact an entire generation of young people will not have housing. Like, just startling that's going to happen. There are already employee challenges, finding people. There's lots of reasons for that. One of those is that they can't afford to live anywhere. They can't afford to live here. And the fact that there's not a 3 bell fire alarm going on this is just startling to me. So on top of that now are rising interest rates, to deal with inflation. How are you going to survive? How are small developers going to make a living within this, I'll call it, broken environment?
Hopefully I'll still be able to.
You can always go live with your in-laws, I guess.
I've done that many times, as you know. Going back a ways, the 1940s, around 44, 45, end of the World War II, soldiers coming back, people put off forming new households because they went off to war. We had a big influx of immigrants and refugees coming over to Canada at that time. Government had a report that said they needed, I think, something like 750,000 units of housing, and they pulled out all stops. And you see the kind of remnants of that throughout the city in Oakland. You see these little strawberry, little 2-bedroom houses in Esquimalt. There's a big group of these wartime houses. And government really put their effort into building these communities. And push or pulled, we are going to get there eventually. In the context of rising interest rates, it's going to really constrict the ability for certain developers to build. You have to be really closely watching your margins, what you're proposing, the size of your homes. What that interest rate increases. I think we're going to see a reduction in some of the purpose-built rentals, even though purpose-built rental prices are through the roof. They don't make financial sense anymore. So we're going to probably have to see governments going, okay, this is a real issue. The people who it affects are starting to vote. So it's going to affect who gets elected into government. We're going to actually have to start taking this seriously. And that I could see in the next 5-ish years. I still think we're going to see an acuteness, and probably on the resale side, the prices are probably are flattening, and they might come down a little bit just because of interest rates and the amount of money in there. But the rental side is just getting pinched, and we're at 1% vacancy rate. We're going to see fewer built probably the next little while. So I think you're going to have a lot of, over the next 5 years, let's say, governments hopefully will really focus up on the bigger ticket, and how do we get more housing units built. They can build affordably, they can subsidize and build some affordable units, but you still need the market side to kind of bring the product to the market.
So again, thank you, Ryan Jabs. That was really great that you came on and talked sincerely about what it's like to be a developer in this day and age. And we ran a shorter clip out of this Ryan Jabs interview earlier, and we did get viewer comments that people were sick of hearing from developers. And, someone needs to take these risks. Somebody needs to get out there and, put their money up and try to build something better for the community. Yeah. And, God knows, John, you and I both have younger family kids, young kids and growing families. And for them, it's such a challenge to get into this housing market. If this is a way to do it, then I think we have to be all ears. So on that happy note, John, it's pretty well time to say goodbye. Perhaps, again, you could explain to people how they can watch the Rumble Room, share the Rumble Room, become a member of the Rumble Room family through our various platforms.
Absolutely, Robin. And before I do that, certainly wishing in some deeper, more profound way this year than usual to certainly celebrate Canada Day and all of its festivities and celebrate this country and all that it represents. I'm so proud. I'm so happy. I'm so blessed that we live in Canada. And for, and for others who are watching us, join the heartbeat of the Rumble Room on Facebook. That's where we rock and roll. We also have a Twitter site and we have a YouTube site, and everyone is on, all of our interviews are on that YouTube site. And then of course we have a news and views group. We get a lot of comments all over the place. I mean, across all of these platforms. This particular news group on Facebook is structured for folks to present their viewpoints. We have an Instagram page and we have a TikTok page. So we are all across the milieu and insanity of social media these days. And therefore, today of all days, this time of year, I am today going to remain the Canadian sensation, that being John Jurisic.
And I'm Robin Adair, and O Canada, I stand for thee, and rumble on.